And as one of who is, as a non-doctor, a non-health professional, I look at 4 levels of COVID infection. The first is the moderate that needs no hospitalization. And that was me. I had all of the major symptoms, but I didn't get close to going to the hospital. The second stage, by my classification, is the serious, but hospitalization is not needed. And that was my wife. She was really quite low for a while. Then there's the third. The short hospitalization is required with no ventilator being needed. People get well and go home quite quickly. But then there's the fourth, where long hospitalization with a ventilator is required and one's life is seriously threatened. Now, we have a beloved family physician who is in that category. He himself was in charge of organizing all of the preparations for the major hospital that's near us for COVID. He took every precaution that he could take, and he still got it. And we were on Zoom meetings having prayer for him regularly, and he survived, praise the Lord. And he's testifying everywhere now about it because of the way God spared his life. So that's my personal testimony. I won't say more about the COVID. I won't get into the political aspects because that's very, very controversial and polarizing. But that's my own story with the COVID. On a professional level, I would like to look at COVID through the lens of a missionary and professor of mission. COVID pandemic is likely to change some aspects of society permanently. Here in the US, they're talking about some jobs completely disappearing, some new jobs being added, and many, many jobs moving from the office into the home and staying in the home permanently. How these and other societal changes will affect Christian mission remains to be seen. We don't know. But to prepare ourselves for mission to the world in this century, we need to understand the major global trends that affect mission. Now, I want to get Frank's picture here so that if something goes wrong, you can wave at me. I'm looking, I think you are, I want to unmute you, Frank. I'm not seeing you yet. There you are. All right. Okay, I'm unmuting you, Frank. So if you need to tell me something, just speak up and wave your hand at something. I can see and hear you now. All right. So here, Adventist mission in the era of COVID-19. And I'm going to speak of 5 generations and 7 trends. I'm making it personal because mission is personal. Mission is about one person sharing the good news with another person. And to name one famous missiologist, it's about one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. And so I am going to hope that you'll indulge me to tell some elements of my own family story and mission. And as I tell a 5 generations story, I'm going to be mentioning 7 trends in missions. Oh, well, now it doesn't work. So let's see here. Okay.
Down at the bottom is an arrow.
Right. Okay. Okay. There we go. There we go. So I'm going to talk to you about 5 generations. The first generation, my grandparents. The second generation, my parents and in-laws. Cheryl and me, and then my children and my grandchildren. These are these are my people on my mother's side. At the front are my great grandparents who came from Norway in the 1880s. They came to Nebraska, met each other in Nebraska, married, raised their family, and these are their children behind them. The one on the left is my grandfather, Gordon. And then come the others. They all went to overseas for mission service except one. And the one on the right is John Oss, and he was in China from 1919 to 1949 when the communists chased him out. Don't be surprised at the name Oss, O-S-S. That was indeed my mother's maiden name. She found a man who gave her one extra letter. And when she married, she became Doss, D-O-S-S. So it's not a typo. That's really how it is. So my grandparents were missionaries in Trinidad. There's in the lower right-hand corner is in a red circle is the two islands, Trinidad and Tobago. Grandpa was there as conference president, and they lived there 5 years. Their story is a bit sad because when they went back to the United States, both grandparents died in a car crash almost immediately. But here are some pictures from the 30s of their missionary service in Trinidad. It could have been the 50s when my father was a starting missionary in Malawi. Here the family is, my mother is the older, taller of the two girls. The blonde-headed one. This is their house. A few years ago, Cheryl and I went to Trinidad, and we with this picture, and we showed somebody the picture, and they were able to take us to the same house. There it is. Unquestionably the same house where my mother lived in the 1930s. And there we are. You can imagine what an emotional moment that was for me to visit the home where my mother had lived in the last year before her parents died in the car crash. I met another very interesting lady there standing next to me. And when I showed this picture with my mother in it, she said, oh, her mother is the one in the center, the little short lady right in the middle is her mother. So this lady's mother went to school with my mother in Trinidad, and I had a lot of fun meeting her there. So the first trend I want to talk to you about is an exploding population. Now, this is nothing new to you, but I don't know if you realize how much the world population has grown in 2,000 years of Christian mission. At the time of Jesus, the experts estimate that there were 200 million people on earth, on the whole earth. So when Jesus gave his great commission, he was saying, go and share the good news of salvation to 200 million people. Well, time went by. 1,000 years, it's grown to 300 million. In 1800, it was just under 1 billion. Now, 1800 is about the time that Protestants started getting going with world mission. You're probably aware that Luther and Calvin and the other missionaries, the other reformers, did not have a vision for world mission. They were good religious leaders who reformed the church's theology, but it was not until the pietists of Germany started getting involved in world mission in the late 1700s that Protestants started really getting active. And then William Carey went in 1794 to India, and he's considered the father of the modern missionary movement. So in broad terms, we speak of the modern missionary movement as going from 1750 to 1950, 200 years, the modern missionary movement. And the beginning point is roughly 1750 when the pietists started being involved in mission. The ending point is 1950, just another approximate date when the colonials left, colonial powers left, and when the churches of the world, including places like Malawi, began receiving their independence and churches began having their own national leadership. So when William Carey was going to India, there was only about 1 billion people on earth. A century later, about the time when my grandparents were toddlers, 1.6 billion. Moving forward to 1950, the year before I was born, 2.5 billion. To 2000, the year 2000, 6 billion, and now 7 billion people. Even though we are familiar with the idea of population explosion, I don't know that we really take seriously what it means for world mission. It is an incredible challenge that awaits the Christian church as we face the new century. This is another way of illustrating it. By 2050, there could be 9 or 10 billion people, depending on how things go in this old world, if time lasts that long. Right? Another illustration, in 1934, when my grandparents went to Trinidad, there were about 2 billion people, roughly. And today, over 7 billion people. Clinging to this little earth, with the world, the earth's resources being overused, squandered, abused, and you wonder how long can 7, 8, 9, 10 billion people cling to this earth that is our home. It's so dear to us. Another way of visualizing it is like this. If you would divide the world's population into 3 parts, then 1 part is Christian and 2 parts are non-Christian. This percentage has stayed fairly stable for 100 years or so, in spite of very active Christian mission. Now, looking at it another way, one of those, the little purple guy in the middle, representing roughly 2.5 billion people, that little guy is near the Christian little guy, 2.5 Christians. So if the green guy with his church shares Jesus Christ with his neighbor, then the purple guy, 1/3 of humanity, can have an opportunity to accept Jesus Christ. But there's also the blue guy on the right, another 2.5 million people, 1/3 of humanity, who are beyond the reach of a local Christian who can share the gospel with them. Sometimes we think that the days for overseas missionaries are gone. In fact, that is emphatically wrong, emphatically wrong. The days of cross-cultural overseas missionaries are very much with us, and the need is greater than ever before. Here's the difference. Here's the difference. Instead of most of the missionaries being people who look like me, they are going to be people, and they are people who are from every part of the world, who are going to every part of the world. Nevertheless, they are cross-cultural missionaries who need to visit those who do not have local Christians to witness to them. The second trend is one you're also familiar with, expanding urbanization. This is the broad picture. The yellow is urbanization, the gray is rural. So since 1900, you can see what's happened. The Church of Ellen White's day was mostly rural. And now in sometime after 2000, the urban population passed the rural population of Earth, and it's growing dramatically. And this is the mission field of today. Here are the 10 largest cities of the world. Put them together, and that comes to 230 million people, roughly, in those two great cities. Cities over 1 million people. By 2025, it's not far from us, there may be as many as 650 cities with over 1 million people. In 1800, when William Carey went to India, was in India, beginning his work, it was only London that was over 1 million. Cities over 1 million, there are about 31 with known Adventists. There are about 126 with 150 or less who are members of our own denomination. So my wife and I visited our son in Egypt. He was principal of Now Union Academy, and we enjoyed going to the Sphinx and to the pyramids. This is the academy, Now Union Academy, planted right in the middle of one of the great slums of Cairo, surrounded by a big wall, but performing a very, very vital role. There are more people baptized at that academy than in any other place in the Middle East North Africa Union. Cairo is this massive city with the Nile River running through it. When we went to Malawi, this is what the mission field was. There are still some places like that in Malawi. All over Africa, there's still some places like that. And those are wonderful places, those villages. Those are mission fields indeed. But those are only a few of Earth's people live in places like that. This is today's mission field. Here is a big church in downtown, in one of the suburbs of Nairobi, Kenya. And here is today's mission field. On the right, the slums, right next to the high rises and the skyscrapers. In Asia, look at some of those big cities like Bangkok, and you look at hundreds of those great skyscrapers that house thousands of people. And in each skyscraper, there is the shopping that they need. There's parking. People have to have a pass to get in and out, to get into those places. And so they are by themselves an immense missional challenge. A third trend, shifting Christianity. Christianity started out as mostly in the global south. Now, this is how missiologists divide the world into global south and global north. Basically, global south is the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And the global north is Europe and North America. And so Christianity began in the Middle East, but as the Muslims began their rise in about 600, gradually, and as travel opportunities did not exist for missionaries to go around the world, and as the church did not have the mission vision, the church became really a church of the north, or really a white man's church. At the time of the Reformation, it was a white man's church. When the modern missionary movement began in 1750 to 1950, it was still dominated by people of Europe and North America. But things have changed. And now the majority, we're heading towards being a majority of the global South. And that has many implications. One of them is that it is now the global South that has to answer and fulfill the Great Commission. In 1800, when Protestants were really getting going with mission, only 15% of them were outside of North America and Europe. Therefore, they had to go to Africa, Asia, Latin America. They had to go in order to obey the Great Commission. Now it is the Christians of Latin America, Africa, and Asia, parts of Asia, that are the people, the believers upon whom God's mission relies. So my parents are the second generation. We went to Malawi in 1954. My parents did different things. They spent 21 years altogether in Africa. You're probably wondering if I'm related to Desmond Doss. You might have seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge, and I am, but not closely. My dad, Norman, was a sixth cousin of Desmond. We had a common ancestor, Thomas, and he and Sarah lived there in the dates that you see. So I never met Desmond, but my father, Norman, met him, and here they are standing with each other at the right. My dad was also in the military. He saw a very, very fierce battle in Iwo He was in several other places, several other battles. On the right, here he is giving an IV to a wounded Japanese soldier. And his life was spared miraculously so many, many times as he went through the war. In the middle, he is the person in the middle of the picture on the left. He's not the one smoking the pipe, although his faith did slip a little bit during those years. But by the time he came to this point in his life, he had recommitted his life to Christ. And when he left the Navy in 1947, he was determined to be a pastor, to find a good woman to marry, and to be a missionary. So my parents were sent to Malawi. Here we are on the left, the three of us with my dad's parents on the left next to us. My father preaching his farewell sermon in the church that he grew up in Denver, Colorado. We had one passport. The three of us were on one passport. And we said farewell on the right to the Doss relatives, my uncle on the left, and my grandparents and I, and we headed for Africa on the Robin Tuxford. We sailed to Cape Town on the Robin Tuxford. And this is how we went. It took 29 days to go from New York to Cape Town. When we got to Cape Town, the division office was there, and the people met us, showed us the office, took us to Helderberg, saw some other things. We stayed in the Cecil Hotel, I remember that. And we got on the train and went north through Botswana, through Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and finally came to Malawi, Christmas Day, 1954. Riding on a train, something like this. This is what you and I rode on, Frank, when we went to Helderberg,
Yeah.
and that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
Right. So these are the places we lived in Malawi. My parents and I lived in number 1, 2, and 3. And my wife Cheryl and I lived in number 4 and 5. Cheryl and I spent 14 years at number 5 in central Malawi at Lakeview Seminary, where I was principal of a small seminary. So let me review the history of Adventists in Malawi. Livingston went in 1859. First Anglican missionaries in 1861. George James was the first Adventist in 1893. He was a guy who raised his own money and went on his own. He spent a few months in Malawi. He couldn't get things going alone, and he decided, well, he should go to Zimbabwe and join forces with the folk at Salusi, when they were starting up. But when he set off on the journey to Salusi, somewhere along the way, he got sick. He died. He never reached Salusi, and he was buried in an unknown grave. In 1902, Adventists purchased the Plainfield Mission from the Seventh-day Baptists. Thomas Branch and his family and Joseph Booth were the first official Adventist missionaries. Plainfield was renamed Malamulo Mission. And in 1905, the first baptism was conducted with 7 boys who had attended the literacy school to learn reading and writing, mostly studying the Bible. And the population grew from 1902 to about 1 million to over 17 million today. A dramatic population growth. And today, well, in 2017, the population was over 500,000. This is indeed one of the great success stories of Adventist mission. So these are the branches. Thomas Branch and his wife. And Mabel, the girl in the middle with the white dress standing up, is the teacher at the first school. And not all of us realize that the African Americans were involved in mission, and this family was the first official missionary family with Joseph Booth. But he didn't last very long. He was an unstable fellow, and he went on while the branches remained. The first Adventist house of worship in Malawi. James Malinki, a second generation pastor who was a pioneering missionary all over Africa, the nations surrounding Malawi. He planted churches. He was probably in my grandparents' age group, or a little younger maybe, but he worked with my dad. The medal is one he received from Queen Elizabeth for his service to the people of Malawi. The recognized church leader. This is Tekarani Mission, where the first place where my parents and I were posted when we got to Malawi. We lived at the house right up here. Can you see the cursor? Does it show?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the house where we lived. And some other buildings, the school and the dispensary. No, the girls' dorm and the boys' dorm. And over here on this side was a dispensary. This road was about a lane and a half wide, Frank. So when you saw another vehicle coming, you made your plan carefully, and you found the place to squeeze off, and they found the place to squeeze by. And that road was something when it rained, and we had a lot of rain, and there were times when it was completely impassable there. So Dad supervised some pastors as he worked there. And the man here at the far left is Pastor F.A. Boteman. He became the first Malawian Union president in the year, 1982, I think it was. And the others were colleagues with my father. The man in the middle, James Nkoka, was the mission pastor of the church at Tekarani Mission. Well, I had some playmates, no siblings, but I had playmates. I don't know if you can pick me out or not. These were my buddies, I got out in the morning, went playing, came home in the evening. These were the guys that taught me how to speak Chichewa. And I was way ahead of my parents. I remember them with the vocabulary cards, trying to pound the language into their heads. And I just went out and learned it when my friends taught me. I don't speak it perfectly, but I'm fluent in Chichewa and Chitumbuka. So on the left is this guy. So this guy standing on my right in the picture is this guy standing on my right in the other picture, maybe 40 years later, something like that. On the very first day that we were at Malamulo, Tekarani, we heard a noise about 5 in the morning. My parents went to look, and there was a line of people already. They heard, Mrs. Doss is a nurse. We are sick. Please take care of us. Well, mother didn't have anything yet. We had just barely moved. So she asked them to give her a few days. She got together some equipment. And here in the backyard, she treated 6,000 patients in 10 months. The picture, the lighting is very poor. She sits at the right, and she is taking care of tropical ulcers, malaria, bilharzia, scabies, worms. Oh, plenty of intestinal worms, you know, and the need was dire. So a medical assistant was hired and put in this building. And thereafter, my mother's work was to supervise him, to buy him medicines and look over him. And she was the consultant for difficult maternity cases. What happened is that the village midwives did their best, but their best sometimes wasn't good enough. They would use the village medicines, and sometimes they did harm, sometimes good. And when the woman was close to death, then they would bring her to my mother. If possible, Dad would take her to Malamula Hospital. If the weather was good, that took an hour. If the weather was rainy, it took 3 hours in that pickup. But if Dad was gone, or if the road was too bad, Mother would be there struggling to save the life of the child and the mother. Many, many times the child would be lost because, and she was just trying to save the mother. It was quite a heroic chapter in her life. This is the Shiri River, a tributary of the Zambezi. A good bit of Dad's territory was down there on the lower Shiri by the river. This would have the weather, for those of us who know Zimbabwe a bit, like Chiredzi or someplace down there. Hot place. Oh, it was a hot place. Plenty of malaria. The mosquitoes nearly killed us when we were down there. Yeah. A youth camp, one of the first youth camps, about 1956 in Malawi. One of the first, maybe outside of South Africa, one of the, perhaps the very first in Africa. And there's Dad conducting a baptism, a visit that we enjoyed to Victoria Falls. And this is, Frank, you would recognize that picture of me.
Yeah.
Wayne and Alan Selhaney, headed from Blantyre, flying to Harare to take the train to Gweru. I met Cheryl Brown at Helderberg, and she came to visit us. So Dad took us to the game parks in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, and we rode on top when to look at the animals, and jumped in the car when something dangerous came near.
Wait.
Here's the first president of Malawi, Dr. Hastings Kamuzabanda. And does anybody, Frank, do you recognize the person next to him? Haile Selassie.
Word. Okay. Yeah.
The Emperor of Ethiopia.
Ethiopia.
And with Kamuzu's famous red Rolls Royce that he really liked a lot. In the 1990s, when my dad retired, in fact, in this picture, he is about the same age in which I am now. If you take off my mustache, we would be brothers perhaps. So when he visited us at Lakeview in the 90s, he was reunited with three of his most beloved colleagues in ministry. On the left, Pastor Kasambara, Pastor Samuel, and Pastor Nyasulu on the right. So this is the story of the Malawi Union membership from about the time of my birth to the present. It's a fabulous story of mission success. The fourth trend, growing world religions. In the last century, roughly, just say the 20th century, here's how the population grew. The world population almost 4 times, of 388%, but the Muslims grew most dramatically. The Hindus grew more than the world average, and the Christians and the Buddhists grew a bit less than the world overall growth rate. Here's the split, the distribution of the world religions. Putting together Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists, and you get 41%, approaching half of humanity. Approaching half of humanity in those great non-Christian world religions. Many of them are located in what we call the 1040 window, 10 degrees north of the equator, up to 4 degrees north of the equator. In that red box reside a huge portion of humanity that is unevangelized, totally unevangelized. These are the nations of the 1040. There's a mind-boggling number of massive nations, and many of those nations are substantially unevangelized. So the second generation now, the first generation was my grandparents. Now we had my parents, and now to my in-laws, the Browns, Victor and Alma Brown, were at Helderberg, at Lakeview with us, and in the Philippines. They spent 14 years overseas. So on the left, they're at Cape Town, downtown Cape Town, at the parade. Am I right? I think that's the parade. And the family, about the time they arrived at Helderberg, and the family riding in the Table Mountain cable car. And then there they are in there working with a group of people in the Philippines. Here they are working with us in Malawi. It was a privilege to have them for 3 years, living right next door to us. So our children got to know that set of grandparents really well. And Dad Brown was a fantastic help to the teaching there at Lakeview. The fifth trend, strong but uneven Adventist growth. So here's my case study. Malawi on the right. I've already demonstrated that to you. I've shown that. And you look how the graph is there. Now, these numbers are a little bit old, but it still gives you a picture. So 2013, they had 429,000. Now it's over 500,000. But look at Trinidad and Tobago, where my grandparents were. Well, it's not as big as Malawi, but then the population is a lot smaller than the population of Malawi. So Trinidad, Tobago is still a good success story in Adventist mission. But look at Egypt, where my son and his family served for 4 years at Nile Union Academy. Look at that. In 1970, the membership had grown to over 2,000. Now it's back to something like 800. So this illustrates the dramatic variation in how Christian mission has succeeded and in different parts of the world. So in 2018, these are the percentages. 6% of the members in North America, 17% in Inter-America, 12% in South America, and 65% in the rest. Now, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa is the other place where we have a lot of membership. In the West Central, 4%. The East Central, 19%. Southern Africa, Indian Ocean, where you all are located, 19% of the World Adventist membership. The rest of the world has 58%. So this is how it breaks down. The Americas have 35%. Sub-Saharan Africa, 42%. And the rest of the world, think of what's in the rest of the world. Just think of India and China being in the rest of the world by themselves. 23% of the church's membership. Look at these wide variations in the population for every Adventist member. Southern Africa, Indian Ocean, where you all are, has the most favorable numbers of all. 42 people for every Adventist church member. Look how the numbers change. North America, where I am, 278 people for every Adventist members, and look how the numbers grow until in Euro-Asia, the former Soviet Union, almost 3,000. But in the Middle East, North Africa Union, the percentage is just astounding. There are 116,000 people for every single Adventist member. If we were to apply these numbers to other denominations, actually they would be quite similar. And this part of the world has well over 1 billion people in it. And it is the single greatest mission challenge that faces Christians today. This is another way of looking at it. If you take 6 divisions, the 3 in the Americas, the 3 in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, that accounts for 77%, let's just say 3/4 of the Adventist membership. But you realize that only 1/4 of humanity lives in those 6 divisions. In the rest of the world, there's only 1/4 of the Adventist membership, but 3/4 of all of humanity. And so that's Middle East, North Africa, Europe, and Asia, with the mega nations of China and India also being massive missional challenges for us. So the 3rd generation, Cheryl and myself, we did different work in Malawi. We stayed there 16 years, 2 years in northern Malawi, 14 years in central Malawi, mostly teaching and developing Lakeview Seminary. And in 1976, we were ready to go. Here we are at the front. And right here, and Auntie Betty, here's your brother-in-law. Right here, Uncle Russell Staples, right there. He taught us and was, as we were preparing to go back to Malawi in 1976. Lakeview Mission, Lakeview Seventh Adventist Mission is where we lived. This beautiful picture on the right is what we saw when we looked out our front window, our front door every morning on that place. We did a lot of building. The students on the left are wearing a centennial shirt celebrating James. I did the first missionary. I just did a mental lapse there. The first missionary who came in 1894. So in 1994, we celebrated 100 years in Malawi. Well, our children were born there. We lived in that house for 14 years. And the 6th trend is poverty, suffering, and violence. And I've used Ebola for a few years as my example. It was a good example. A lot of people died. in West Africa. Here's Dr. Gillian Seaton, who was a single physician working in this hospital, this Adventist hospital here. During the Ebola crisis, she would receive patients on those steps. She would decide whether they had Ebola or not, because the government had said that this hospital was for non-Ebola. Every other hospital was for Ebola. But the folk who needed everyday sorts of problems needed treatment. So this Adventist church hospital was for general medical care. And so this single lady working there by herself with her local associates administered that hospital, and she's still there, by the way, serving as a doctor there. And now, of course, COVID has stolen the news. Ebola seemed like peanuts now compared to what COVID is doing. And the pictures of mass graves in the industrialized world, and you've seen them on the news. I've talked about it already. I won't say too much more about it. But this part of Adventist mission, the humanitarian part, is massive. It's just massive, and remains something very dramatic. Fourth generation, our children, our daughter and her husband and kids were in Guinea Conakry. Guinea Conakry is here. Yeah, it's up here, Guinea right here. And Sao Tome is a little island. Sorry, my daughter just calling me now, so she'll have to talk to me later. The little island of Sao Tome is right here. They were there, then they went to Madagascar. Whoops, they went to Madagascar, then to the Philippines, now they're in Canada. So Sao Tome is an incredible little island. Our son-in-law was director of ADRA there. It's actually a small, impoverished island, but a place of great beauty. Madagascar is also a place of great need and also a great beauty. And the Philippines, this is the campus of IAS, the Adventist University there, where our son-in-law went to started teaching. He had been ADRA director in the other places, but he went to using his anthropology to be a professor there at IAS. Richard, our son, was in Kenya at Maxwell Academy, and in Egypt at Nile Union Academy. Here are some of the scenes from Maxwell Academy. I'm going to use Mount Kenya. The children's story tomorrow is going to be about Mount Kenya, which you see on the right side of the screen there. One of the great blessings we had, that Cheryl and I happened to be in Nairobi on the occasions when both of our granddaughters were born. And that was a delight. We were doing work there at the time, and so Cheryl, being a nurse, was in the delivery room coaching Hadassah for the delivery of our two little babies. Then Nile Union Academy, place in Egypt, place of great challenge, great opportunity, but huge challenge, where they invested 4 years of their lives. The last one, the seventh trend, is one I don't say too much about, but it's human migration. I think this is a big factor even in South Africa. If I'm not mistaken, you have migrants coming into the country with or without papers, and that is something that you are facing politically, but it's a mission challenge. What's happening is that on this side of the world is that migrants from your side of the world and other places are showing up. We have Malawian churches, Zimbabwean churches, and churches for Filipino churches, every kind of church here in North America and in Europe. And this is both a mission opportunity and it's a challenge. What happens is that when those people come over here, many of those folk are committed Adventists. They join churches here. They become very active here. They become sometimes some of our most active members. And on the other hand, they are people who are in need. They might have humanitarian need that we have to address when they come over here. And so human migration is a fact of our world in this century that we need to think about missiologically. So we ask ourselves, how many generations more? My grandparents laid down their lives tragically in their early 40s through a car accident, and they had no idea. We had no idea. They had, that now another generation, our grandchildren are growing up. Here they are in Egypt and at Andrews University. The picture at the right is about a year old or a year and a half old. They are sitting on the statue of J.N. Andrews and his daughter and his son. They went as the first official Adventist missionaries who went to Switzerland, 1874, and they went without a mother because the mother of the family had passed away. And so we ask ourselves, how many more generations? Lord, come quickly. How long shall we wait? We are eager for you to come. The COVID convinces us that we need you. It's a sinful, painful world. Lord, come quickly. Maranatha. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. God bless you on this Friday evening.
Gary, would you close with prayer for us?
Do I need to turn him on?
Yeah.
How shall I do that? Whoa. Yeah. Can I make you